glove. You build something, you can't even get into it. That's smart. Oh, my shoulder popped. All right, everyone, welcome back. Welcome to the shed again. As you can see, I've got a fair bit of progress done. It's looking more like a car or buggy thing, and less like a pile of tubes and scrap. So yeah, just gonna walk over kind of what I've done so far and what I've been working on and my plans moving forward. Hope you enjoy. So like I said, I've been pretty busy. It's looking more and more complete every time I work on it, and then I remember I need to do something and have to take a bunch of stuff apart. Perfect example was I actually pulled the whole engine and transmission combo out because I had to add the oil drains in the oil pan, and then also swap it from a AW70 to an AW71 transmission because it's stronger. And then doing that, I also did the LH 2.4 flex plate and all the sensors. There's a new cam sensor back here, or not cam sensor, I'm dumb, crank sensor. So then all of this, because this is a earlier engine, this will now run on the newer style LH 2.4 to start with. I don't think I need standalone yet. So while that engine was out, it gave me and my friend Evan a good chance to start welding up the frame, because we could kind of contort ourselves up in here and in all sorts of weird angles that hurt your back to weld up most of the chassis. So most of these tubes are welded now. Still have a little bit to do at the back. And then also, I'll get to it, but there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do before we finish off the back, because it had to do with the seating position, the harness bar, and all that fun stuff, but I'm gonna get ahead of myself. So chassis welded, and then also while I did that, I took it upon myself to finish off my strut top mounts. Well, they're not finished, but they're getting closer. So plasma cut out some top plates with some extra strengthening here. We settled on about 6 degrees of caster and almost 0 camber, but I'm going to play with that later, just because I need a baseline to start with, and I like a little bit of caster. So we did that. I'm still going to tie, because right now this is all just welded to here. It will just pivot off if you hit a big bump. So I'm going to put some bracketry here and then tie it down into this bar here. Kind of make this all a little stronger of a strut top assembly. So hopefully hammer it on some jumps or whatever we do, or you know, it won't peel off the frame instantly in the first test run. So we did that, and then also started on the rear spring mount stuff. You can see here, this is just a bunch of plate that's tied into the frame rail, and then in the 760 IRS trailing arm, there's just a Volvo 240 rear spring. Fits in the pocket fine, ties up into here. I don't like how this is looking, so I'm probably going to add some more bracing up into this area, down, to kind of strengthen that, and then maybe some more gussets here, and just kind of tie all this in and make it a little bit stronger, because again, the force is going to be pushing up on it. And you know, I'm adding more gussets where I can and trying to be less of a caveman about it and more of think like an engineer, because cars are made out of sheet metal. Like, this is 1/8 inch plate, which is probably still overkill, but you know, old Trevor would have done probably 3/8 plate or something stupid heavy. So more gussets, thinner plate, and more triangulation is, I guess, the buzzword of the day. Everyone likes seeing triangles. So I actually did, let's see if I can get a shot here, put it on the ground, and it sat really like butt low. It sagged in the back. It had the Carolina squat dog dragging its butt on the ground. That I hate it. I don't want it to sit like that. But I think I'm going to add either some stiffer springs in the back or more springs, or play with the shot or the spring mounting spot to kind of get some more preload on the rear. And then also the front, the struts are topped out. Even with the weight of the engine and everything in it, it's still topped out. So I guess that's good because it means it's a lot lighter than a 240, because those are just stock 240 springs, uncut, nothing. And they're literally maxed out on their travel. Like it's as far drooped as it can, even with the full weight of it. So I've got some suspension tweaking to do, but I'm not even going to bother with that until I get 98% of the components attached to this thing and me and a passenger sitting in it, because it's going to get heavier as we go. Like a tank of fuel, a battery, 2 people, there's an extra like 400 pounds. So I'm not worried about it too much. You can kind of see those are some motorcycle shocks, and I might actually end up using those just to give me a bit more stiffness, tying them into the top of the knuckle, which is actually where the bump stops used to be, and then making some kind of a eyelet, you know, bracket pin arrangement here, and some more brackets. So that would get me a bit more strength, but again, I want to have, you know, fairly soft suspension. It needs to have a bit of sag sitting in its travel and not be topped out until you hit a big bump, because that'll ride like crap. So a lot to think about there, and I'm kind of just making it up as I go as far as that. But it did, there's some pictures of it as proof. It was sitting on all 4 tires on its own weight. With nothing underneath it. So that was kind of motivating, and it looks like something. I don't know. I think it looks pretty cool. I'm sure a lot of people have already noticed the spoiler alert that is on the back of this thing now. It's ridiculous. I love it. I don't care if you hate it. It's staying on. I've always wanted to put a wing on something ridiculous, and this whole car is ridiculous, so why not put a wing on it? It actually worked out well that the wing mounts double as my radiator mounts. I'm trying to do that more and more with my stuff, kind of have a bracket do more than one things, because then you need less brackets, which is less work. But you have to think ahead more, which I struggle with. So that was kind of a happy accident, as our friend Bob would say. But yeah, big wing, does nothing for performance, but it looks cool, in my opinion, so it's staying. So on the front, if people remember, I did extend the lower control arms out about 3 inches, and that was done mostly to match the track width of the rear subframe, but also keeping a normal camber angle with my struts gave me some more room away from the turbo housing and everything on the top mount turbo. So doing that, I needed some longer tie rods, and 2001 Ford Focus tie rod ends. Come on, focus for me. There it is. Fit perfectly into the earlier style ZF 240 racks and into the outer tie rod ends perfectly. Same threads either side, and they're about 3 inches longer. So for those lifted Volvo guys, or angle mod drift Volvo guys, or anyone who's extending or playing with lower control arms and needing longer tie rod ends, inner tie rods, there you go. 2001 Ford Focus is the ticket. Out to the back here, because I know people are going to ask about it. Yes, the radiator is going in the back because I simply don't have room for it. And I've always wanted to do a rear mount rad. It's a bunch more problems that I'm like creating for myself, I guess. So I picked this one off a buddy for 50 bucks. I believe it's from like a 93 Ford Explorer, like a drop-in aftermarket thing. And, you know, it's decently big. Aluminum, looks, you know, about the quality you'd expect for something from the internet. But the rear, or the lower rad hose, I don't know, I've never seen a 93 Ford Explorer, but why does it come out at an angle like that? But it actually ends up working out perfect, because I want it to come out with the rad at an angle. The outlet is almost perfect up and down. The top one's still out that way, but you know, we can get some flexi hoses, but that was just kind of a nice little bonus. And then that fan is off like a Jeep Liberty. I don't know. It was big. It was free. I tested it up to my battery on my workbench and it tried to fly away and blew a bunch of like sand and metal dust in my face. So it moves air. So hopefully that will keep it cold and pull enough air through the rad. For the fuel tank, I am just literally going to use a stock Volvo 240 fuel tank. I was looking at fuel cells. I've used fuel cells in the past. I don't really like fuel cells. They slosh and fuel starve and cavitate and do weird things that I'm not a fan of. Mostly just to do with the pickup point. They're fine for like a drag race car. You know, if you have a square fuel cell, pickups at the back, you're going that way real fast, fuel sloshes that way, and kind of, you know, your fuel pump picks it up off the bottom and you go away. But, you know, drifting or anything side to side, like they slosh. So then you either have to have a pickup on either side or one at the front and rear or all the way around. Or you build like a surge tank, which, you know, you have a low pressure lift pump, which pumps out of the fuel cell into like a little pot, and then that fills up. And then you have a high pressure pump that pulls out of the pot up to your fuel rail and your injectors. And that pot makes sure that it's always clean, air-free fuel. But all that is just extra stuff that I would have to fabricate. I have fabricated. On my very first car, I ran into fuel starve problems and ended up doing a surge tank. And it's a bunch of lines and fittings and pumps. And if you've ever taken a 240 sending unit out, there's a really nice little baffle in the bottom of this tank that sending unit sits in. There's a low pressure pump that pulls out of it, goes to the high pressure pump rail, then comes back and returns right into that little catch baffle fuel thing. So this already has kind of a surge tank baffle setup in it. So it was free. So I'm just going to use that. And, you know, before people freak out, oh, you're sitting here and the fuel cell's here, you're going to die and explode. People ride motorcycles all the time. You're riding a tank of gas. At least the tank of gas is behind you. And I probably will do some kind of a firewall or something. So yeah, you know, there's already an in-tank pump in it. It's got the fuel baffle stuff in it. I can use the filler neck, which has the little, you know, the proper vapor sealing cap and the shutoff. So if I fill it at the, you know, a pump gas station, it'll click off. Just build some mounts, kind of isolate it, hang it like it was in the car, and yeah, some kind of a, you know, cover over it. And I think that's going to be the move. So it's the cheapest move anyways, and this project's all about trying to do it cheaply. So yeah, pretty happy with the fact that when we built this, it kind of fits in there perfectly. So it would have been nice to get it lower, but I think the battery and stuff's going to go under it in like a box, and maybe some other stuff, maybe the main pump. So, you know, we'll still have a lot of the weight back and fairly low, which is kind of where I'm trying to put most of it. So another thing that I've kind of been playing with is seat mounting position. And I picked these seats up, or a friend actually picked them up for me. It was a bit of a run on to get them. They're just like the plastic dune buggy seats with like some foam covers. They're nice and sturdy. And it actually took a long time to make the mounts for these because I wanted to make them adjustable. So what I ended up doing is there's some slots, there's some plates that bolt to the seat mounting holes, and then, you know, you have to get a wrench. But worst case, you know, if a short person or a tall person wants to drive this thing, I just can slack it off with a wrench, which I'll probably have in the toolbox in this thing. Because let's be honest, stuff you build yourself, you probably have a toolbox with you and a fire extinguisher. Both good ideas to bring with you. So yeah, I can adjust the seating position, which will be dope. So now that the seats are mounted, my friend donated a harness, and now we can start building our harness bar stuff. So we purposely left all of this unfinished because until we got the seats mounted, and we didn't know where the seats were going to mount until we kind of put the steering column in place and kind of saw where everything was lining up. Now that we know where the seats more or less are going to be, we can design the harness bar, because, you know, you want your harnesses straight, not kind of pulling down or up, because your vertebrae work better when they're not squished together. So, I mean, look up any harness bar design and it'll tell you kind of the rules that you have to follow. So thankfully, my friend Evan, who's smarter than me with this stuff, is going to help me make it as safe as possible. So we'll have a harness bar to pick up the top of the harness, the shoulder straps, and then there'll probably also be a crossbar just to give us some more rigidity in the back of this thing. So yeah, pretty happy with that. It's cozy in there. You can see the stock Volvo 240 shifter is mounted. That was actually planned ahead of time when we were building these downrights and the window bars. I wanted to use the stock shifter. So it's cozy in there. Like, you don't hit elbows or heads too much, but you know, the farther in board I put these, I figure the more protection you'd have if you do flop it over. So, you know, there's plenty of clearance for your head with a helmet on to anything around here. But my stance on stuff with cages is that you should always have a helmet on, because your head is fairly soft and these are fairly hard, and the two getting together is bad news bears. So there you go. Seats, shifter, the steering column, it's just held in with some zip ties. They're good zip ties, but I probably want to do something better. Again, we couldn't really figure this out until we mounted the seats. Now that the seats are mounted, I can start figuring out this. This is a stock 240 steering column. I wanted to use it mostly because I had it, but also because it has all the switchgear assembly. It has some nice mounting points. It also has a collapsible section in it, which, if I'm crashing into things hard enough to collapse this, I've got other problems, but still, in the interest of safety and not harpooning myself into the seat like a kebab, I figured it was good to use it. So it also picks up the pedal box assembly, which is kind of giving me a bit of grief, mostly just because this is going to be mostly a flat floor. In a 240, if you got one, the floors kind of go low and then raise up towards the firewall. This is flat, so obviously this at an angle which is comfortable and not too low, but also not sticking, you know, your hands out through the window, places the pedal box in a less than ideal spot for me. I've trimmed it down. I'm going to kind of strengthen it up again because I don't want it poking too high over the frame rail. It's not really much higher than the intake or anything else. But now the brake pedal is kind of in a goofy position, like your heel is touching it, not really your toe. So I'm probably going to have to shorten it. That's going to change the pedal ratio. I don't know how much. This thing's going to be a lot lighter, so theoretically you won't have to push on it as hard to stop. But this is where modifying factory stuff can get you into issues pretty quickly. So I've kind of left this off for now. I'm going to build more floor first and kind of see where my feet are actually going to rest before I start mounting all this stuff. The steering shaft is easy. It's down, you know, into the rack there and then back up into the universal here. It's got to be a little bit longer and it'll be up a bit, you know, so this isn't going to hit when it turns, but it's you know, pretty close now, so I can go pretty low, which is good because the lower I put that in, the higher I put this in, which keeps it out of your lap. So it'd be nice to have this thing turn by itself pretty quickly. I'm not going to do angle mods for it because it's pretty good. Stock 240s are actually really good. So we're going to leave it at stock angle for now. You can, but 240s are a little bit harder. When you want to start getting angle into these things, you have brake calipers running into control arms, and also this goofy 4-bolt mount that bolts the lower ball joint to the strut. There's big bolts here that start running into all this stuff. It's why like the 740s with a single ball joint mount are a lot easier. And actually, I think the angle kits that you do actually convert it to like a 740 style ball joint when you start buying like factory angle kits for Volvo 240s. So stock angle for now for me because I don't want to go down that road. Or, you know, use E36, E46 stuff on it, like my LS car. But I'm not going to go into that today. So, yeah, that's kind of where we are for driver compartment stuff. Everyone wants to know about the twin turbo stuff. Obviously, that's kind of the whole centerpiece of the build. So, I've been making decent headway on that too. I took this manifold off. Like I said, a fellow I know sold this to me kind of half finished, wanted me to finish it off. The orientation, he had the top turbo I wasn't happy with because the pipes were pretty much running right into my spark plug boots, which obviously are going to melt. Even if you put those little booties and stuff on it, like, you gotta get space away from them. Like, it can't be touching. This gets very hot. So I had to cut it apart, kind of clock this all out, clock the turbo back up, weld it all back together. That's all tigged up. It's bolted on for good now with some gaskets, which means I could mount the turbos for good. All the runners are the same. They're about 17 inches long, plus or minus like 3/8 of an inch, which shout out to the fellow who designed this, because I can't take credit for that. But that's good. Equal length is good. If for nothing else, just it'll make the sound, whatever sound it ends up sounding like, cleaner. You know, if you get, you know, one side long and one side other, I've done it before. You can make this sound like a Subaru if you get really wild with it. That's why Subarus sound like Subarus. It's not because they're a flat four. It's because one exhaust manifold goes here, down into the car. The other one goes all the way around. And that's why they're all uneven and burbly sounding. So I want this to be even because I want it to sound as good as it can. Like I said, however that ends up sounding, at least it will be to the best of my abilities. As far as like feeding these things, I kind of had to scratch my head about it, and the solution I came up with... Oh, my intercooler fell down. Didn't hit the ground. That's fine. That's what I get for just balancing it there. Anyways, off the end of the main oil gallery, kind of where I always take the oil when I add a turbo to a Redblock, it's -8, and then it goes up into this little manifold canister thingy I've made. So it's -8 in, it's capped off on this side. This will go out to my oil pressure gauge, and then I've got two 1/8" NPT to -3 adapters, and then from there I'm going to go up. I've actually got some factory hard lines that go up that mount into the top of the turbos with like a banjo bolt. The top one's actually a little bit longer, but I'm a fan of hard lines on turbos because hoses melt. I don't care how much heat proofing you put on them, they always seem to melt or char or burn or get soft. The factory does this for a good reason. So I'll have to weld on like a -3 JIC or conversion fitting, and then I'm going to have a little bit of flex hose back to my manifold because that's going to be mounted on the frame rail, and this moves somewhat. So then that's kind of the oil feed done. And I did it that way because I want to have even distribution to the turbos. And my theory is if it's kind of a deadhead setup, it will go into here, can't go here, and then it will kind of equally pressurize up and then out to each turbo. I know people have said, you know, do a Y or, you know, a bunch of other things like that. But the turbos, like a journal bearing turbo, has actually got a fair bit of restriction on it. So it's kind of got to take what it takes as long as your bearings aren't thrashed. So just trying to make sure that I have a lot of volume up to this point, and then, you know, the pressure will kind of go where it needs to go. In theory, I don't know yet. Maybe I'll put like a gauge on each one of these to see what it does, and hopefully my motor has a good enough oil pump that it can handle that. But I mean, you know, a big turbo, like guys put diesel truck turbos on these, those clearances in those journal bearings are a lot bigger than these little 13Cs. So, I mean, got to keep an eye on your oil pressure when you start adding things that take oil. You know, piston squirters, 16 valve heads, all that kind of stuff. You can run out of volume pretty quick. So hopefully I engineered this good enough. As far as the drain side of things, that got a little tight pretty quickly. I was going to try and sneak it on the back side here and then down into the oil pan, but quickly realized that wasn't going to happen. So now it actually comes out here from the bottom of the top turbo, out and around this and down, and then I've got some heavy duty fuel push lock hose, and then into one of the fittings on the pan. And then the bottom one was pretty easy. That was just a little bit of extension and twist it, and then into the other fitting on the pan. So they're both above the baffle that sits in the pan, if you've ever had one of these off, which seems to be the best spot for them. They're hard lines, again, because soft stuff melts. I hate those, you know, AN adapters that go right on the bottom of these. That's a terrible idea in my opinion, but, you know, to each your own. This is just all repurposed turbo oil drains, and actually this crossover pipe, coolant crossover pipe that all these Redblocks have is the exact same diameter as the factory turbo drains. So if you're ever needing to make your own turbo drains and trying to find out a chunk of that pipe that's the right diameter, if you've got leftover Redblocks, just chop that up, you know. Well, I just used a TIG on here because it's pretty thin, but I'm going to have some kind of a brace probably to here, or, you know, trying to clear it so that the exhaust will still pass. But, you know, that's a long pipe that's going to vibrate. That will crack in short order if you don't brace it somewhere. But, yeah, trying to plan it so that each of the exhausts will still clear. I think I got it. They're not going to be huge. Like, I can probably run 2-inch exhaust pipes off each of them. That's still 4 inches total. And a 4-inch exhaust on a Redblock is lots. That should be good. There won't be any restriction. So, yeah, drain's done, feed's done. I don't know if I'm going to water cool them. They have the provisions for it. People have said they haven't in the past. I like the idea of water cooling these cartridges. But again, there's going to start being a lot of piping here. We still have to do intakes, the outlets. Yeah, so I think that's going to be a strong maybe. And, you know, just be smart about running it if I get the turbos hot, letting the turbos cool down before I shut it off, so you don't coke up your oil in there, which is why these are here for the most part. Last thing I'm going to do, you can see I've tried for the angry eye, you know, because this thing identifies as Jeep Wrangler, apparently. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm not crazy about it, but angry eyes, nah, let me know, but I'm thinking no. Need some big round, you know, fog lights, dune buggy style, some up top there, you know, like a big RC car. But anyways, the intercooler, like I said, that's a Dodge 24 valve Cummins intercooler that we carefully cut down. And then kind of looking at, you know, the end tank on this side, I'm going to build custom end tanks. So, you know, the core is actually a good quality core. It's decent thickness. There's lots of fins here. I'm going to divide it in half about here. And then this side will take the bottom turbo. This side will take the top turbo. So, you know, end tank's going to go, they'll probably just look, you know, some kind of like a little triangle thing here, and then drill a hole, pipes out into the turbo outlets. I had to lay it down just because I have length here but not height. So it's kind of almost going to be like a V-mount style thing. So I might have to build some ducting or something to kind of force the air into it. But I still think it'll work okay. You know, these turbos, until it gets silly, they're really not going to be pushing that much. They are known for making hot air, but I'm only going to be running them at half of probably their capacity and still have a lot more air than I know what to do with. More than enough to chuck a rod through the block. So this intercooler should be plenty big enough, even with less than optimum airflow position. And then, yeah, on the other side, it's just going to go, there'll be a single end tank. to kind of collect air from both and channel it. Again, pipe will lay down up here and then up into that K-Jet manifold that I've added a 960 throttle body to. I think that's 3-inch. So, you know, the one side, there'll be two 2-inch pipes in, 3-inch pipe out, up into there, boost, susu noises, proceed to head gasket delete. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at for now. Again, I've kind of been jumping around the car. You know, I get bored of doing seat mounts, and then I'll do strut mounts and board that and do turbo stuff. It's all got to get done, and I'm trying to do it in a way that, you know, the turbos kind of need to be there so I know where they're going to be, because now I can start building like my firewall, right? So, you know, I know my exhausts are going to need this space, so my firewall has to, you know, take that into account. So everything about this project has been like that. I have to do 6 things to know where this thing's going to be theoretically floating in space before there's mounts built for it. You know, like the pedal box is just, you know, Bluetooth for now. But, you know, I can probably tie that into the firewall, which I couldn't build until I knew where the turbos are, which I couldn't do until I finished the turbo manifold. And I couldn't finish the turbo manifold until I moved it away from the spark plugs. And I couldn't even start the turbo manifold until I built this frame rail and the strut mount, so I knew how much room I had to work with. Repeat that for everything. And you get an idea. So hopefully that gives everyone kind of a good idea where we're at and why it's taking so long. I'm hoping to get the bulk of the structural fab done in the near future, and then I can start doing fun stuff like brake lines and electrical and, you know, more aesthetic stuff, firewall stuff, gauge pods, you know, lights, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I'm not a structural steel guy. I'm kind of just bumbling through it. I am learning a lot doing it, but you know, it starts to drag on you for a while, and then you kind of got to switch it up and do something else. So I think a couple more weeks and I might try and jerry-rig up a fuel system and drape the engine harness on it and kind of, you know, jankify it together and see if I can get that thing to fire, because I'm really keen to hear what it sounds like with half the cylinders going through one turbo and the other half going through the other. So got to get the oil feed stuff sorted out and put some oil in it, and, you know, we can flash it up quickly without some coolant for a few seconds and just hear it. And I think that'll be like hugely motivating, because I think that's what everyone wants to know, myself included. Like, what is it going to sound like? I'm hoping like a Saab V4 or like a Honda VFR. Like, those V4s had a really cool note. And trying to get that with an inline 4, yeah, I don't know. It might just sound like a boat, which, I mean, I guess that's sounds like a normal Volvo or tractor. So, anyways, again, thanks for watching, and I'll try and keep up with the updates. Until then, thanks for watching. Have a good one.